These times are strange, it's quite surreal. It's never been like this. Remembering the good old days when we could hug and kiss. We'd pack the gyms and restaurants and move through public settings. We'd give high fives and drink at dives, hold hands and dance at weddings. Now the days are longer, yet the darker in the way. We're pressing pause on normalcy, just going day by day. But we can still make jokes and art, garden, dance and sing. Cook, read books, try on fun looks and learn about new things. We can talk with friends of ours and have a heart to heart, just so long as we all stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do. Stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you, 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. These times are quite historical, so step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to 6 Feet Apart Productions. I'm so thrilled that you're joining us tonight. It's going to be a really exciting and different and enjoyable evening. So first of all, we want to say hello to everybody watching on YouTube. Hi. Please put your name and where you're listening from in the chat, and maybe we'll try and give you a shout out later in the show or at the end. So welcome. So glad you're watching. Also, I want to give a big hello and say hello to our backstage audience. So let's see our tellers, and we've got a few people backstage. So everybody wave. Nice to see you all. Right. So Ed and Angela, let me just go through what's going to be happening. Ed Stivender and Angela Lloyd came to us with this idea that they'd like us to produce a show because they wanted to recreate their Fringe show at the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesborough in Tennessee. And we thought this was an excellent idea. I was particularly thrilled as I did have the honour of performing there last year at the 50th anniversary celebration of the National Storytelling Festival. So that was amazing. So to give you a bit of history, this sort of informal gathering first started, Ed thinks, at the beginning of the 1980s with Ed and some others. And then Angela Lloyd says she first started participating around sort of 89, 90. And she recalls that one of the listeners at the festival had lost their wallet. And so during the course of the Courthouse Steps concert, what they decided to do was pass around a hat, raise a whole load of money so that they could replace what he'd lost. And then, as luck would have it, the wallet was recovered. And so all the people that participated in the little Fringe show, they shared out the money and gave a portion of it to an account in Jonesborough, which helps storytellers in need. And so that's a whole tradition that's gone on to this day. I even got some money. Can you believe it? And there's also, the whole story that needs to be told. I think Ed or Angela needs to tell us at some point about all the various items that are given away in exchange for a donation. At the very start, they did tansy flowers, they did milkweed, little bits of lamb's wool, even acorns, can you believe it? But then over time, it's developed, and now they give away a little bit of fabric fringe, which people pin onto the swatch, which is the registration for the festival. And I actually received one myself. And then I tried to find it. God knows where it is in my nightmare of an office. So sadly, I couldn't find it, but I do have it somewhere. And what's really lovely about the Fringe is that anybody who wants to is able to tell a story. And then if for some reason there weren't many takers one year, then the host would just look around the room, spot some fellow people, and then drag in a fellow teller. So it was quite funny. You had to be a little bit wary, even being an audience member. And then another tradition that's developed over time is that Ed Stivender, always in the Fringe, he starts off or finishes it off by playing his banjo and singing his own version of different songs with Yankee Come Home and so on. And you'll hear all that in just a moment. Okay, so that's like a very brief history. But after today, then we at 6 Feet Apart are going to hand the reins over to Ed and Angela, which I have to say is a little scary. And then we're going to, so please stick around, because at the end of the show, we're also going to bring all the tellers back and they're going to share some of their memories of their own personal memories of the festival over the years, the Fringe over the years. So with no further ado, I want to introduce the amazing Ed Stivender. He's not only a fabulous storyteller, excellent MC, accomplished musician, but unexpectedly I found out he's a really amazing rapper. Now, I never knew that about him. He's been on the 6 Feet Apart stage quite a few times. I've also chased him in person around both Timpanogos and Jonesborough festivals just to get him to record silly videos for me, and he always takes it in good spirits. He's one of the most gracious and charming people I know. He makes me laugh all the time. He's incredibly supportive of other storytellers, and he's a very witty and lovely person. So please welcome to our virtual stage, Ed Stivender.
Thank you, Claire. Hello, everyone. I just want to show you that this is a piece of the Fringe that you will have gotten if you were at the Fringe Festival this past October or the next Fringe Festival. That's what the piece of Fringe looks like. We buy it at Gaffney's fabric store in Germantown. And when we start the Fringe, we always start with Old Joe Clark. Clark had a big old house, 15 stories high. Every story in that house was filled with chicken pot pie. Round and round, old Joe Clark, round and round, I say. Round and round, old Joe Clark, I hear banjo play. I went down to Joe Clark's house, he invited me to supper. I stubbed my toe on the table leg and stuck my nose in the butter. Oh, round and round, old Joe Clark, round and round, I say. Round and round, old Joe Clark, I hear banjo play. Show up at 5 o'clock, you get to be in the show, whether you're any good or not. And I've been in the show all the years I've been in Jonesborough, at least since about 1984, and I'm not that good, so there's a lesson to all of us. Oh, never marry a school teacher, I'll tell you the reason why. She blows her nose in open bread and calls it pumpkin pie. Ho! Round and round, old Joe Clark, round and round, I say. Round and round, old Joe Clark, I hear banjo play. Well, thank you very much for coming out to the Fringe on Zoom. A little bit different than the Fringe in person, but that's the way modern world goes. Thank you very much, Claire, for introducing me, and thanks for inviting me and Angela to come into the Zoom world and do this. And I want to thank your tech guru, Mark, and your assistant co-producer, Virginia Stoops. It is a real pleasure to be here. So I'd like to introduce my partner in rhyme, as it were. Angela Lloyd showed up in 1989 at the Zoom of the festival. Showed up in 1989 at the Fringe of the festival, and she immediately became a wonderful co-host. She and I have done this for the last 33 years or so, and she has been a wonderful help because she is cajoling me to do it even the years I don't feel like doing it. And thanks to her, the Fringe has been going on for 3.5 decades or so. She is a wonderful storyteller and a real bright light. Excuse me while I look at my notes. She grew up in Caracas, Venezuela, where her father was stationed. She has music in her blood thanks to her accomplished musician mother. She has an MFA from Florida State University. She studied with no other than Laura Sims and has been selflessly sharing her musical talent for the past several decades. As co-performer, she is exceedingly generous and her time is exquisite. She claims as her purpose building community through poetry, story, and song. She has taught washboard around the globe, and she's with us tonight. My partner in rhyme, Angela Lloyd. Hello, Angela. Welcome. You may want to unmute, Angela, if you feel like it.
There we go. So I'm standing close to start because Doug Elliott told me to. So here's a little a little bubble bath song. I take off my shoes, put on my hat, run some water in the bath, put in the bubbles and the bar of soap, put on my pippers and my periscope. I'm a-sitting on a cloud of heavenly dream, sing out loud till I feel the steam. Nothing like a bubble bath to hit the spot. If the water runs cold, run some hot. Clouds of joy, yes sir, clouds of joy. Praise the Lord in the morning when you get up and pour in the bubble bath. About 1 cup, don't forget your bubbles. Ba-da-da-da, a little kazoo break so you can stretch your legs. Thank you. So one thing about the washboard is that it always allows and invites all of the most ridiculous songs you know. That's one of the gifts for playing the washboard. And I also, when I would think about going to the courthouse steps, I always would think, what foolery, what nonsense could I bring that would be wide and open and even participatory to the crowd that was gathered on the stairs. So that became part of the tradition. Now, one of our members who often came was Barbara Freeman, and she's one of the first people I heard tell stories from the stage when I first went to Jonesborough in '86. And she, alongside with her cousin Connie, they said from the stage, go home and tell your stories. And I took that to heart. And I changed my solo theater work and started to plant my feet and tell the truth. So please welcome Barbara Freeman, who has traveled around this country, who has delighted us with old time stories, and mostly with her voice and her humor. Please welcome Barbara Freeman.
Yay. Thank you. It's not working, Jenny. Thank you. Can y'all hear me? No.
Yes, we can. No,
All right. Thanks so much. Well, being 2 years shy of 80, I tell everybody I'm older than God's dog. But I'm going to step back in time with you for this and tell you that when I was only 10 years old, back in that day, it was safe to put me on a train, take me all the way to Birmingham, Alabama, where I got my cousin Connie to get on the train with me, and we would head to Palaca, Florida. We had 13 cousins in Palaca. Our Uncle Phil and Aunt Ree and our cousin Cindy, well, they had 7 horses. They had chickens and cows and pigs and quail. And on the St. Johns River, they even had a house that was halfway on the land, halfway on the river. And it had one thing in it, a big, huge ping pong table. We were in horse and pony paradise, but we worked really hard. We learned how to slop pigs, crate chickens, milk a cow, and you have not tasted milk until you put your hands on an udder and aim one of those little tits right to your mouth and get that warm milk. It was heaven. And we also learned how to raise the quail and to fish. Yeah, our grandfather, Samuel Elis Freeman, we called him Pop. Pop would take some bread and he would roll it up, wet it a little bit until it was kind of sticky dough, and he'd roll it up to look like a marble, and he'd put a hook on it, and teach us how to catch fish on the St. Johns River. And also he would teach us how to get in the rowboat at night with a lantern to draw the shrimp and how to put a weight that circled the net to catch the shrimp. All these weights were kind of heavy, like large marbles. And we put the weight in our mouth and cast out the net and catch shrimp. We just learned so much and we had so much fun. Well, one day I was on the St. Johns River on the bank, and my cousin Cindy comes walking up and she said, Barbara Ann, what you doing? And I said, I'm doing two things, Cindy. One is I'm thinking on how silly that veterinarian is, old Dry Fry. You know, people would come and bring all their cows and horses and dogs and cats and such, and he'd get them well. But sometimes they would die. And then the people were so sad that Dry Fry decided he was just going to build right next to his veterinary a taxidermy. And that taxidermy was where people could catch a big, huge fish, and they'd bring it in and they would say, I'm not going to cook this thing. I want you to taxidermy it, stuff it full and put it on a block of wood. And I'm going to put it on the wall in my living room. And I'm going to tell everybody that's the one that didn't get away. And you know what? He built that taxidermy next to the veterinary, which is a little unusual, but what was most odd was the sign Dry Fry put out front. It read, either way, you get your dog back. And you know, it was kind of like, I've just been thinking about that and other things, and then I'm doing something else too. She said, what else you doing? I said, Cindy, I'm fishing. She said, oh, fishing, Barbara Ann, I don't see your pole. I said, nope, don't need any. She said, well, I don't see a line, fishing line. I don't need any. Barbara Ann, I don't see a hook or nothing. Cindy, I don't need any. Well, if you don't have a pole or a line or a hook, how are you fishing? Well, Cindy, I've got a big old plug of chewing tobacco. I got it from my grandmother, Regina May's snuff box. And what I do is I take that chewing tobacco and I sprinkle it out all over the water there. And those fish, they come up and they get it and they dive back down into the water. Barbara Ann, I don't see how that's fishing. Well, Cindy, those fish, they've got to come up to spit. And when they do, I just take this stick and I hit them on top of the head with it. She said, oh, have you caught very many that way? Why, just the other day, I caught me a 10-pound minnow. Uh-huh. Well, Barbara Ann, I guess I just need to tell you my fishing story then. You know, it's kind of a little bit of a miracle, I guess. You see, I was out in the rowboat at night to do some shrimping, and I had my net with all the weights around it and everything, and I had Pop's lantern all lit up on the bow of the boat, and I'm out there, and I get to the spot where I think it's going to happen, and I put that weight in my mouth and threw out the net, and oh, I knocked Pop's lantern off the boat down into the water. I bet you Pop is angry. I mean, that was his grandfather's lantern. My heavens, that was before electricity. They needed that thing. Barbara Ann, let me tell you the rest of the story. I was out just the other day in the rowboat doing some regular fishing, like with a pole and a line and a hook and all. And I hooked up that same lantern. Well, that's not a miracle, Cindy, because you know how we're out in the boat a lot and we'll hook up old boots and everything. That's regular. Yeah, but Barbara Ann, that lantern, it was still lit. And that's when I told her, I said, Cindy, I will take 9 3/4 inches off that minnow if you will at least blow out that lantern. And you know, you might be wanting a miracle, so I'll add this. Hundreds of years ago, there was a man named Anthony. He was canonized a saint. He was a monk. And he was Saint Anthony of Egypt. And he ran the monastery. He was the abbot. But I'll tell you, God told him he wanted him to himself. So he wanted him to go up to a cave and live as a hermit and spend more time with him. And that's what Anthony did. But everybody would come to visit him because he was so wise and he was holy and he was funny and he was wonderful. But one night, Anthony was in his cave and he had some straw there. That's what he slept on. And he had his lantern all lit so he could read his holy books. And then he heard something at the foot of his bed. There was gnashing of teeth and thrashing all about and grunting, groans and sounds and screams and sound. You could even hear the slobber hitting the dirt. And Anthony raised his lantern and he looked at the foot of his bed. And there he saw him. It was the devil, Satan himself, trying to terrify Anthony. And when Anthony saw him, he just said, and I think it's a miracle. He said, oh, it's just you. And he blew out the lantern.
Thank you.
Go back to Ed.
Thank you, Barbara Freeman. Thank you very much, Barbara Freeman. As a matter of fact, I should mention that Barbara was one of the people who was involved in the pre-Fringe when, during the ghost storytelling happening up the hill, Chuck Larkin of happy memory and Barbara and some other storytellers would gather in one of the tents that was empty and do some music, and clog dancing. Was there that I learned clog dancing from Barbara. Thank you very much. And it was because of Barbara and her cousins, Connie Reagan Blake, finding me in Hartford, Connecticut, that I have any kind of career these days. So thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Connie. All right, our next storyteller, you may know him as Noah Lepp. This young person has been in the festival Fringe at age 6, and every year since then, almost. He made such a wonderful debut at age 6 at the festival that he was asked back and came back for the Fringe for the next couple of years, and he was always a great favorite. But then he grew older and got rid of the old name Noah and now goes by the name of Adriel. He has studied at Marshall College creative writing, and he joins us now, taking time out from writing his first novel. He is a genius in linguistics and, in fact, has invented a Scrabble game using the International Phonetic Alphabet. He's an amazing person, and I'm going to introduce him by the name that they choose these days. Will you welcome with me the amazing Adriel Lepp?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 6 Feet Apart presentation. I hope you've been enjoying the stories so far. I also have a story for you about a monk.
Ah.
So this is a story that's I first heard it from my grandfather. It's been passed down through my family a little bit. Once there was a businessman who was going with his company to a business meeting a ways away from where he lived. And after the meeting, on his way back, he was just driving home in his car, and he was driving some back roads, and his car broke down somewhere that he'd never been before in the middle of nowhere. He didn't know where he was. And so he looked around for a little bit, and he saw that up on the hill next to him, there was a monastery. And so he went up to the monastery, and he started to talk to the monks, and he got an audience with the abbot, and he talked to the abbot, and he said, "Hey, listen, my car broke down down outside your monastery. Is it okay if I stay here for the night? You guys can give me shelter. You can call AAA, and then I'll be out of your hair in the morning." And the abbot was like, "Oh yeah, sure, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. Go ahead. We're here to help." And so the man went into the little guest room in the monastery, and he settled down, and he was drifting off to sleep. But as he was drifting off to sleep, he heard the strangest noise he'd ever heard in his entire life. It was unfathomable. It was unconscionable. It was the most alien, absolutely out of this world noise that he'd ever heard. He couldn't process what made it. And he pondered on what it could be for a long time, but eventually he did fall asleep. And then he woke up the next morning, and he went back to the abbot, and he was like, "Hey, what was that noise that I heard last night when I was going to sleep?" And the abbot said, "Oh, you heard that, didn't you? Well, unfortunately, I can't tell you what made the noise. That's a secret. You can't know it unless you're a monk." And so the businessman said, "Oh, are you sure? Like you can't tell me what it was at all?" And he said, "No, I'm sorry, I can't tell you. You're not a monk." And so the businessman made his peace with that, and he went back home. And then a year later, his company went on the same business meeting in the same place, and he was driving back on the same back road, and his car broke down the exact same place. And he went up to the monastery, and he was like, "Hey, it's me again. Same thing happened. Cars broke down outside. Can I use the guest room? Can you call AAA?" And the abbot was more than willing to let him do that again. But as he was falling asleep, this time, once again, he heard the strangest noise that he'd ever heard his entire life. It was even stranger this time. He couldn't even fathom what could have made it, whether it was animal, mineral, what. He had no idea. So he pondered a little more, but he knew that he wasn't going to be able to figure it out. So he fell back asleep. And then the next morning, he went up to the abbot and he said, "Hey, listen, I know that you said that I can't know what made that noise because I'm not a monk, but come on, can you let me know just for me?" And the monk said, or the abbot said, "I'm sorry, I can't tell you. You're not a monk." And the businessman said, "Okay, well, what do I need to do to become a monk then?" And the abbot said, "Well, at this monastery, to become a monk, you have to tell me exactly how many blades of grass there are in the world." And the businessman thought about it for a second, and he thought, "Okay, I can do that." And so he agreed to that. And then for the next 10 years, whenever he was out anywhere, whenever he had any free time, he was just counting grass, counting grass, counting grass. And then he came back 10 years later, and he went up to the abbot, and he said, "I figured it out. There are 593 quadrillion, 403 trillion, 943 billion, 382,933,406 blades of grass on the planet." And the abbot said, "Yes, that's correct. Congratulations, you can become a monk now." And the businessman was elated. He was so excited to finally figure out what had made this noise after 12 years after first hearing it. And so the abbot led him to the porter of the monastery, the guy who had all the keys. And the porter said that he would show the businessman the way to what made the noise. And so he led the businessman to this massive ornate door. It was carved out of mahogany. It had all sorts of inscriptions and designs on it. And the porter pulled out a large key, and he put it in the keyhole, and he unlocked the door, and he slowly pushed the doors open. And behind the door, there was another door. And this door was made of wrought iron. And the porter got an iron key, and he put that in the lock, and he opened up the door. And behind that, there was another door. This door was made of, it was like hewn out of stone into the tunnels of this monastery. And the porter got the key, and he put it in the lock, and he pushed this one open. It took a lot of effort. The businessman helped him get it open, but he pushed it open. And behind that door, there was not exactly a door, but there was fire in the place of a doorway. It was in a doorframe. It was just roiling fire. And the porter pulled on like a fireproof glove, and he got his key, and he found the right place in the fire, and he turned the lock, and the fire went away. And then they walked through that, and there was another door that was very reminiscent of some courthouse steps. And he put the key in the lock there, and they opened the door at the top of the steps. And then behind that was the final door. The porter said, "This is it. This is the final door. Behind this, you'll see what made the noise." And this door, it was like 3 feet tall. It was very small, narrow, hard to get through, most likely. But the porter handed him a little tiny key, and he said, "You can put this in the lock, you can crawl through, and you can see what made the noise." And the man nodded. He thanked the porter. He took the key. He put the key in the lock. He opened up this teeny tiny door. He crawled through, and what he saw on the other side absolutely astonished him. But I can't tell you what it is because you're not a monk.
Aha! Thank you, Adriel. Thank you for introducing us to a new genre of storytelling, the Shaggy Monk story. Thank you very much, Adriel Lepp. Okay, our next storyteller is the gentlest teller in the business, as far as I know. He lives in the wilds of North Carolina and knows more about nature and the earth than any human I know. He has recipes for almost any source of food, including roadkill. And he can tell you how to make sure roadkill is fresh. A walk with him in the woods is like a PBS nature documentary, up close and personal. Those of you who have read the Hobbit stories might remember Tom Bombadil. This is a living Tom Bombadil. He has appeared in Jonesborough with his possum named Blossom, as well as his brilliant son, Todd. Here is a picture of Blossom on this. Here's a picture of Blossom the possum on the jar of honey that he gave me. And he is so careful about the earth that to use this jar, he got it recycled from Tropicana orange juice. He is gentle on the earth, gentle with his stories. He is the wisest man I know, and he is a great partner in the Wicked Catholic Dialogue Center. Will you welcome Doug Elliott?
He's got long, slimy whiskers and a sly little grin. You never do know where that catfish has been. Catfish, catfish, swimming upstream. Catfish, catfish, where you been? Grab that catfish by the snout. Oh Lord, I pulled that catfish out. And that's the chorus. It'll come around. I'll expect you all to help out here next time around, all right? I said the woodpecker in a tree. I once courted a fair lady. She grew fickle and from me fled. Then ever since my head's been red. You all seen woodpeckers now, haven't you? Don't they always have a little bit of red on their head? Now you know the story. Those women will do it to you every time. All right, ready now? Help me now, all right? Catfish, catfish, swimming upstream. Catfish, catfish, where you been? Grab that catfish by the snout. Oh Lord, I pulled that catfish out. Whoop, step the blackbird says to the crow. What makes that farmer hate us so? Well, it's been the case since we've been born. It's been our trade to pull up corn. Hold it now. What's that song talking about? A little old crow? A little old, big old crow pulling up a whole stalk of corn? No way. What that's talking about is those crows are so smart they can recognize that little sprout of corn when it's first coming up out of the ground. Looks like a little sprig of grass. And they are so smart they can recognize that, and they'll pull it up and the kernel will still be attached. And they'll hold it down with one foot, twist that kernel off, eat that kernel, and then go down the road, pull up the next one, eat the next one. Sometimes they can clean out a field in one morning. Makes those farmers so mad. Woo! Catfish, catfish, swimming upstream. Catfish, catfish, where you been? Grab that catfish by the snout. Oh Lord, I pull that catfish out. Up stepped the fish, Drake says to the crane, oh, when we gonna get some rain? Well, the creek's all muddy and the pond's all dry. If it weren't for crawdads, we'd all die. Did y'all have that same drought we did last summer? Boy, I tell you, it didn't rain for what, 2 months, I think. I'll tell you, it was really dry around our place. I tell you, I did get a chance to go fishing. I caught a catfish. That catfish had 6 ticks on it. Now, buddy, that was dry. Let me tell you. And windy, Lord, I saw our prize hen. She laid the same egg twice. Now, that was windy, let me tell you. Come on, help me now. Catfish, catfish, swimming upstream. Catfish, catfish, where you been? Catfish by the snout. Oh Lord, I pulled that catfish out. I was walking on through that field with a black snake bit me on the heel. Well, I whirl around and I run my best. Never bump my head in a hornet's nest. I was walking on down that road. Well, I spied a terrapin and a toad. Well, that terrapin, he began to sing. When that toad, he danced a pigeon wing. When they were singing, you know the words. Catfish, catfish, swimming upstream. Catfish, catfish, where you been? Grab that catfish by the snout. Oh Lord, I pulled that catfish out.
Doug Elliott. Thank you, Doug. What an amazing performer he is. One of my fondest memories is working with him in Selma, Alabama, as we worked with Catherine Wyndham of Happy Memory at that wonderful festival there. Well, our next storytelling couple tell stories not so much with words as with gestures. You may know that Morris dancing has been blessing the farms and towns of England since Shakespeare's time and before, celebrating the change of seasons and important celebrations. Larry Sizdek and Ruth Olmsted of the Pokingbrook Morris have blessed the Fringe since the beginning. They are the real thing, actual farmers and shepherds who dance, as well as scientists and writers. Here they are, Pokingbrook.
So I met Ed and Angela at a master mummers workshop where we juggled feathers, scarves, and lacrosse balls. Today's use of a Morris jig video is the result of Larry realizing he can't juggle his violin with his video camera. So our performance starts with a tiny clip of him fiddling for me in Jonesborough, and then I dance alone to a recording of Lumps of Plum Pudding played on pipe and tabor. Roll it.
Thank you, Ruth and Larry. Thank you for the wonderful Morris dancing. Thank you. And speaking of the English Commonwealth, I just noticed we have a new friend, Liz Weir from Northern Ireland has dropped by. Thank you, Liz. It's so wonderful to see all of the faces of friends that I see on this screen. And I hope you can stick around later so that we can talk a bit more. So, Morris dancing, nature loving, storytelling, song and dance. And now our next performer is genetically musical, son of a nationally recognized musician and songster. He has bended the genre of storytelling to suit his needs as a jazz man. You may have seen him as a supportive sideman to Bill and Andy at the Courthouse Steps a few years ago. Maybe last September you saw him being backup for Doug and Todd at the Timpanogos Festival. And at that same time, he saved my life by putting some gaffer's tape on the script that I was trying to read in the wind. And when the script threatened to blow away, there was Sam Payne saving my life again. You may have known him as the producer and voice of the Appleseed Storytelling Podcast, or as the new director of BYO Radio and TV. He is a favorite son of Utah storytelling and my favorite jazz teller. Will you welcome the Bard of the Wasatch Range, Sam Payne.
Boy, I'll tell you, the Bard of the Wasatch Range, that's what's going on the t-shirts, Ed, for sure.
Sounds good.
What a pleasure to be with you. What a pleasure to be one of the Fringe All Stars. You know, I never had a prouder moment than when I was at the National Storytelling Festival last year, and right at about 5 o'clock, Ed turned to me and pointed his finger at me and said, "Get to the Fringe." So here's a Utah song. You know, around here we tell stories about the people we come from, and the thing is, the people we come from everywhere else and came here. So this is a story that goes all the way to Canada. in Canada, there was a gentleman by the name of Archibald Gardner. Archibald Gardner wound up in Utah, a successful millwright, had holdings all the way from Star Valley, Wyoming in the north, down to St. George in the south, all kinds of success, but it wasn't always that way. When he was a young man, he lived in Canada, a little town in Canada. He had a business deal go south on him and made enemies of half his little town, and joined the Mormon church and made enemies of the other half. And so we wound up having to leave town all in a hurry one day. Rode a horse with a mob hot on his heels. And he rode and he rode and he rode and he rode to the banks of the mighty St. Clair River, the great dividing line between Canada and the United States of America. And he thought, if I could get across the river, I'll avoid the mob and I'll be safe. Well, it was a freezing spring day, and there were great blocks of ice floating in the river. He whipped his horse off into the bushes, and he stuck a toe into the water, and he drew it right back again, thinking, boy, that water's so cold, if I take another step in there, I'm gonna die. Well, with a mob behind and a freezing river before, he knelt down on the riverbank, and he threw up a kind of a Lord, get me out of this one alive kind of prayer. And if you ask Archibald Gardner's family, they say that right about then all of those blocks of ice settled on down in the river like stepping stones, and Archibald Gardner walked across the mighty St. Clair as if on dry land. That's the story anyway, and this is the story of the escape of Archibald Gardner. Oh, my breath, it came all heavy, and my courage ran all thin as I struggled for the border, and I heard them on the wind crying, hey, 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 hey. Oh, the St. Clair rolled before me, giant ice all floating through. It was frozen death in front of me and death behind me too. And they said, oh, you wicked Mormon man, you'll run, but you never hide. You may be bound for the border and the St. Clair, but we'll meet you by the riverside. Singing, hey, 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 hey. Oh, Lord, away in town now I got me a wife and child, and they're all alone and friendless back behind me in the wild. Won't you get me o'er the river, and I'll fetch 'em by and by. I'm a sparrow in your hand, Lord, won't you give me wings to fly? Singing, hey, 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 hey. Then a voice in a whisper on a cold wind said, son, now don't you fear. I cannot give you wings to fly, but I will get you out of here. Well, I'll stretch the hand that calmed the seas, that knit the skin and bones, and I'll lay the ice in the river down, salvation stepping stones, singing, hey, 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 hey. Well, the river ice, she slowed and stilled in the wind. She calmed on down, and I crossed that mighty river like a walk on solid ground. Yes, I passed across the water just like Israel's holy band, and I left my frozen foes and frozen boots on frozen land, singing, hey, 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 hey. Here's a little river crossing music. Well, this story and song was commissioned by the folks at Gardner Village, a little shopping village here in Utah named after Archibald Gardner. And I've never been the kind of storyteller or songwriter who can put off a commission until the last moment. It's just not my way. I'm more the kind of guy who puts it off until the actual moment. And so it was that on a Wednesday, I woke up in a panic because I was due in just a couple of hours to present a finished song to the brass at Gardner Village. Well, I rolled out of bed and I pulled my laptop computer over to me and I put a piece of toast down in the toaster and I typed words as fast as they'd come and I threw my guitar into the car and I drove and I drove and I drove and I drove and I got to Gardner Village and I threw up a kind of a Lord get me out of this one alive kind of a prayer, and I went in and sat down in front of the brass and played this song for him. Its first rehearsal was also its first performance, and the only reason I say that is because I know that there are folks in the audience here who play the guitar and are wondering with some chagrin why this song only has one chord and a chorus with no lyrics at all. Well, the river moved behind me and the ice broke up again. And the men who'd come to find me shook their fists against the wind. And they said, Archie, all the devil's moving in your Mormon blood. We done came to bring you down, but now the river fixed us good. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Oh, my breath, it came all heavy, and my courage ran all thin, as I struggled for the border, and I heard them on the wind. Thank you.
Amazing. Sam Payne, thank you. Bard of the Wasatch Range. Thanks for bending the genre to suit your style. And I think it's time for me to introduce Angela again. If you're like me, you probably can't get enough of Angela Lloyd. I was thrilled when she showed up at my LA debut of Raised Catholic one-man show years ago with her washboard and kazoo and invited me to jam with her on the sidewalk. What a treat. What a jammer. What a talent. Here she is again, Angela Lloyd.
Thank you. Hi. I learned this song from the radio. In the old days, you couldn't get me out of the house between 5 and 7 o'clock on a Sunday night because Prairie Home Companion was on. And I learned this song was written by Sherry Ajimian, and Prudence Johnson sang it. To this day, Sundays at 5 o'clock, my kitchen doesn't get so clean as it used to. I used to spend 2 hours in the kitchen cleaning with a radio. So here is an alphabet song. Goes like this. Come all sweet children, learning to spell, learning your A's to your Z's. Here is an alphabet, study it well, and remember to always say please. A is for 18, B is to exist, C is the season of snows, D is D lady, D bicycle, D song, and E is for Aesop, who knows. F is for effort, G is for Jeep, H for achievement, good show. I is for eyesore, and J is for genuine, K is for cadence like so. L, elementary, M, embarrassed, N for entwist and entwined. O is for eau de cologne, you smell lovely. P is appearing in time. Q for cucumber. R, don't argue, though S, esoteric, this rhyme. T is to England as rice is to China, and U for will you be mine. V, Wiener Schnitzel. W, double your money back. X, extra special are all of you. Y is for why not. Z is for Xerox. And we've come to the end of this rhyme. So thank you. I'm just noticing how it's so good to see the faces of people here. And I keep remembering this feeling of being on the steps and this sense of movement in the crowd. And what you can't see here is that in those days when we were in person, when people were performing, Ed and I would be working the ring of the crowd. For example, keeping Bill Lepp and his wife away from Noah when his story was going on a bit, and they had the idea they might come in and shut him down. We were like, no. So Ed was blocking Bill and I was blocking Noah's mama. But there's this wonderful motion. And the other thing about that time of day was 5 o'clock on a Saturday evening, and there was this warm light. And when I look at the photographs from those times, this warm sunlight on the crowd and on us, and this just lovely warm feeling. And of course, what we also so much loved was that it was a fringe event. It was a rogue event. We didn't really have permission to be doing it, but that made it all the more exciting. And in a sense, we had an unspoken permission. The festival never shut us down. So I wanted to share a story, and this came from, I learned it from Ted Hicks. He's Ray Hicks' family member. And in 2004, we went out to his home and he shared this story, and I've kept it, and I thought it would be a good one to share. I also remember the Hicks family sitting at a table with their apple cakes and apple products and sauce, and being near that log cabin and always counting on seeing them there. So I heard this on the porch at the Hicks house. There was once an old man whose wife died, and he got to feeling lonesome, so lonesome, that he decided he'd go down to the pet store and buy a pet, someone to keep him company. So he went on down, and when he got there, he noticed that there were a number of different kinds of birds, and they were in cages. And he saw one bird was for sale for $19.95. Another bird was in another cage, and that bird cost $29.95. And the other bird was $79.95. And the old man said to the pet shop owner, he said, hey, he goes, how come that bird's $79.95? And the clerk said, well, that's because that bird sings and talks. Oh, that sounded just right for the old man. So he bought the bird and the cage, and he went on home, and he set it down on the kitchen table, and then he sat in a chair and he was listening and watching and waiting. That bird did not sing, and that bird did not talk. The next morning, the old man went down to the pet shop, and he said to the clerk, hey, he goes, that bird did not sing or talk. And the clerk said, what? Are you saying to me that he climbed down the ladder and he did not sing or talk? And the old man said, ladder? I don't have a ladder. And the clerk sold him one for $19.95. The old man went home, opened the birdcage door, and set up that ladder very steadily, sturdily, just inside the cage. And then he closed the door and he watched and waited. The bird did not sing or talk. The next day he went back down to the pet shop. This was a long walk. And when he got there, he said to the clerk, "Hey," he goes, "that bird did not sing or talk." And the clerk said, do you mean to say that the bird walked down the ladder and rang the bell and he didn't sing or talk? The old man said, "Bell? I don't have a bell." And the clerk sold him one for $19.95. Back home he went. He set it up so it had a nice bright ring, and then he watched and waited. The next morning he went back down to the pet store. His shoes were starting to get really comfortable now. He was wearing them in. When he got there, he said to the clerk, "Hey, that bird does not sing and it did not talk." And the clerk said, I don't understand it. How is it possible? You mean to say that the bird walked down the ladder, rang the bell, and then looked in the mirror, and he didn't sing? He didn't say a word? The old man said, "Mirror? Oh, I don't have a mirror." And the clerk sold him one for $19.95. Well, back home he went with that mirror, polished it up, set it up nice and neat. And then he waited and he watched. Ladies and gentlemen, no. He went back down to the pet store the next day. And this time he said, "That bird does not sing or talk. It hasn't said a peep." And the fellow said, "You mean to say that it came down the ladder, rang the bell, looked in the mirror, and climbed up in the swing, and he didn't sing?" Now you could say this with me if you want. And the clerk sold him a swing for $19.95. He went back home. He set it up, tied the strings just right, made sure nothing would go wrong with that swing because it's a delicate balance. And then he closed the birdcage door and he sat and he waited. And what do you know? The bird went down the ladder, rang the bell, looked in the mirror, climbed up in the swing, wobbled back and forth, and then fell down in the cage. And then with one wing holding him up, the bird said, "Doesn't that pet shop sell any bird seed?" Thank you. So at this point in the concert, this is when we'd start selling the milkweed. And we'd have a number of various hats, and we'd pass them out into the crowd. Milkweed, personal indulgences that Ed printed up from the Catholic Church, a certificate where you could confess that you'd indulged in one way or another, and then you signed it saying you did not feel guilty at all. We'd pass it all out, and then we would do the shaker dance. Oh, there's Ed he's showing the indulgence. We'll show it in the after party. There it is. Wait, hold it up again, Ed. Hold it up again. There it is. People's indulgence. I indulged, and I'm glad. And then we'd sing "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple." We would sing and dance the shaker dance, the whole group, everybody on the steps. And oh yes, and the Fringe, of course. And we'd invite people to pin it on their swatch. And here's the thing, is on Sunday, when we were all walking around the festival, we could see who'd been at the Fringe because they all had their Fringe attached to their cloth swatch. And then Ed would close, and he would sing his Yankee Come Home song. So please welcome our master of ceremonies, my buddy, my street concert friend, Ed Stivender.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, everybody in the show. It was very nice to be with you today. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Claire Hennessy and Regina Stoops, for producing this festival on Zoom. Thank you, Mark Hennessy, tech guru. Thank all of you for coming. I look at the screen and see the faces of people who have influenced me and created the person that I have become today. And I want to thank everybody, but here's a song for the end. Just south of the Virginia, Tennessee line, there's a place that is dear to my heart. And although I'm a Yankee by birth and design, it was there my new life got its start. There where every October, 'neath the Tennessee moon, thanks to Jimmy Neal Smith and a few of his friends, there's a storytelling family reunion, raised to the power of myth. It was there I first saw Ray Hicks tell about Jack, first caught Jackie Torrance and Brother Bluesack, heard Doc McConnell spin his medicine yarns, and fell under Catherine Wyndham's charms. God rest their souls. Now there's a train that goes through Jonesborough. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but sometimes when I'm lonesome out on the road, I might hear the whistle of a train, and I dream it's the one blows through Jonesborough and sings out this welcome refrain. Yankee, come home, Yankee, come home, there's a place on the porch just for you. Yankee, come home, Yankee, come home, come sit, swap a story or two, or three, or four, or five. I only got 5, which was true when I first showed up at the festival. I only got 5. Swap you 5. Now on the Saturday of the festival, on the Saturday, 5 o'clock, at 5 o'clock on the Saturday of the festival, you might figure out that this is a new verse. Yeah, you're right. I haven't learned it yet. At 5 o'clock on the Saturday, 5 o'clock on the Saturday, at 5 o'clock on the Saturday, at the steps of the courthouse of the county, there's more storytelling. If you show up at 5, you can be in the show, and you can share in the festival fringe bounty. And Yankee, come home, Yankee, come home, there's a place on the steps just for you. Yankee, come home, Yankee, come home, come sit, swap a story or 2, or 3, or 4, or 5. Only got 5, swap you 5. And when I retire, though I doubt that I will, I won't move to Florida, no. I'll buy me a house up on one of them hills, like Barbara McBride Smith, overlooking old Jonesborough. And I'll sing to you, Yankee, come home, Yankee, come home, there's a place on the porch just for you. Yankee, come home, Yankee, come home, come sit, swap a story or 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, swap you 5. And thank you all for coming tonight, because if it wasn't for you, I'd be all alone in my basement, talking to myself again. Yankee, come home, Yankee, come home, there's a place on the porch just for you. Yankee, come home, Yankee, come home, come sit, swap a story or 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, or 6, or 7. Thanks. See you next time.
Oh, that was fabulous, fabulous. Thank you, Ed. You make me laugh all the time. What
Thank
a
you.
fantastic show. Now, I want to just bring everyone back onto the, all the tellers back onto the screen with me. And while they're all coming back on, I just want to just talk about that train. I have never heard such a loud noise, whistle when it came through. And I didn't know they made trains that long. It was massive. It went on for about 5 or 10 minutes. Everything had to stop while the train went through. I thought, oh, it'll stop in a minute. And it just didn't stop. It just kept on going. I mean, it's probably the whole length of Britain altogether, you know. Anyway, brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you, Ed and Angela. It was just fabulous. Now, we're going to all share little memories of the Fringe. I think Adriel has actually gone. I think his parents have just pulled him away like they used to. So thanks, Adriel. So Ed or Angela, tell us, let's start with you, Ed. Tell us a little memory that you've had from the Fringe.
Oh, the main memory that I have is of the sun setting. The sun sort of sets in the west, which fills that whole front with lovely light. And I have other memories of other people that have been on the steps. J.O. Callahan was there, Margie Brown singing Taco Bell Cannon, and the lovely people, some of whom are on the screen right now. And Jane Dorfman just made her debut this past October, and it's so nice to see the faces on the screen. It's so nice to see everybody as I try to see my screen more clearly here. Thank you all for coming. It's been great, but the memory is of the people. And when we run out of people who have signed up at 5 o'clock, scanning the crowd and dragging people in who unexpectedly appeared.
Oh, how fabulous. So good, so good. Angela, what other memories have you got of the Fringe?
Well, I see John Spellman's in the room, and I imagine, John, you may have been a participant in that Fringe at some point. Seems to me you were. And also, you and I also dashed into there used to be a wedding chapel on Main Street in Jonesborough, and we ran in there together one day, and we're considering getting married by the people behind the counter. So in terms of, I remember we would often go to supper afterwards. Oh, you on mic, you had something you want to, they'll bring you up.
I wanted to say, yes, I remembered that. And my daughter's about to get married next month, so I'd like to run into a place with her. Thank you.
So nice. Yeah.
Thank you, Angela.
Yeah, and I'll just add that we would often go to supper later on, well, actually on Sunday. And I remember that the money that we gathered in the hat, that was my dinner money. I just remember it's my supper money.
Excellent.
So good.
Excellent.
So good.
And I don't know if it's clear that the money that is gained by selling those pieces of Fringe is divided among the people who were in the show, whether they had talent or not. And one part of it was put away for the International Workers of the Word bank account, which is, in fact, a real bank account with about less than $200 in it right now. But it's been used for a good cause over the years. So that's the tradition. But in the heyday, we really did get dinner out of it.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we did. We absolutely did.
And we got a chance to play Name Your Storyteller, which is a great game of the old days, which
We would do that in
may
the
be
restaurant.
revived. Yeah.
We would do it in the restaurant, and people would get up and do an impersonation, and we would guess.
Oh, how funny. How funny. And Barbara, what memory have you got? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Did it work?
Yes, we can hear you.
I just love the faces of of the audience as they were watching Ruth and Larry dance and Ed be crazy on the banjo and all the stories that were being told. You could just see that they loved the festival anyway, but it became so special that the same group of 100, 200, 300 people would show up each year. And then there would be new ones that would just be kind of in a very special zone that was, it wasn't really technically a part of the festival, but it became something that people really looked forward to. Well, I shouldn't say part of the festival. It was a great part of the festival, but it was not official. It was like
never official.
Angela said, yes. And I loved the aftermath when we would invite anybody that wanted to come to dinner with us. We'd always go to like a Mexican place, and we would not only tell more stories, but like Ed was referring to and Angela, we would make fun of our fellow storytellers that were there at the thing. We would get up and tell us a story that they told using their voice and their facial expressions and adding a few that they would have never thought of. But it was really funny. Name that storyteller. So we turned it into a big game afterwards. And it's kind of like when you go to Jonesborough, you never want it to end. And if you're there for the first year, you go get a 10-year calendar and you write down the date, first full weekend in October that has a Friday in it. And you just mark it down. I'll be there. I'll be there. Yankee come home. Whatever you want to write on those calendars, because it becomes a part of your heart. And, Connie and I were at the very first one on the hay bales with Ray Hicks and all these stump speakers that were politicians. And that's all we had to draw from. And then the next year we were on people's front porches. About 20 people could get on the front porches. And then it just grew and grew. And because Connie and I traveled so much around the world, we were able to find people in Great Britain and Scotland and England and Canada and all around, whether they were just front porch storytellers or whether they were starting to be professional storytellers. And so we would invite them to the festival. And then we got tents that seated 1,500 people. And now what are we up to? 10 tents or something, and all those thousands of people. So it's my memories of Jonesborough are just so much a part of my life and are really, really special.
Oh, but it's so lovely that you were here tonight too, Barbara. Lovely.
Thank you.
Sam, what memories have you got?
Boy, I'll tell you, I put on a couple of my fringes because those are those are part of the decor of my office. But I'll tell you, they hang on my bulletin board, and the pin that's stuck through these fringes is also stuck through these $3 bills. And these $3 bills are the first $3 bills I ever made at a Fringe.
Wonderful.
Oh, man.
I'll tell you, I had the conversation with Ed that year. That year, I remember Doug Elliott singing his Catfish song there on the steps. And he came up as he was singing, grabbed that catfish by the snout, and he grabbed onto my nose. And I thought, all right, these are my people. And and later on, Ed came and handed me these $3. And if you've ever performed at the Fringe, you had this conversation with Ed. He handed me these $3, and I said, as every storyteller does, "Oh, Ed, you don't need to give me any money." And Ed put that money in my hand, and he said, "You take this money or you'll never work in this town again."
That's so true. Because he came to me and I was actually scared of Ed. He was so stern, and he brought you as his wingman, didn't he?
That's right. Yes, I remember that. I remember that very well. And I'll tell you, this last year, I was an MC at the festival, and so I was working. And the Fringe was the first time that I'd had a chance to really kind of sit down for a moment, and to sit down with all of you, my friends, and people who have been heroes of mine for a long time, and people who have influenced me, and to sit down not only with those people, but also with people who I only knew from Zoom calls. And suddenly there I was able to meet them in person on the steps of the courthouse. Claire, that includes you, and what a great marker that was for me of the time of coming back together, of a time after a time of being apart. That will always be a very, very dear memory for me.
Yeah, I totally agree, because it's like you're best friends with people you've never ever met before.
Yeah.
So funny. And Doug, what have you got? What memories have you got? You're on mute.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
I guess to me, one of the things that there's a lot of people were passing by, and since it wasn't on the schedule, they kind of wondering what the heck was going on. And I can remember kind of wandering around through the crowd on the street and squawking with the harmonica and singing songs and kind of in people's faces, and that made it kind of fun. But that I think I probably got paid $3 one time too. That hardly covered supper, I'll tell you.
Excellent. And Larry and Ruth, what memories have you got?
I have so many memories. Of course, I met Barbara Freeman and Connie Reagan Blake in upstate New York, and they convinced me to come down to Jonesborough to the storytelling festival. And I think I was there for the second one, and I have been coming ever since. And it's changed my life. Storytelling has changed my life. But for those people that haven't been at the Courthouse Steps, if you go up the steps, on the right-hand side of the door is a big brass plaque of the 10 Commandments. But if you look on the left side of the door, there are signs that say no guns, no knives, no hammers, no saws. But it didn't say anything about banjos. So one of the big memories I have, and Ruth reminded me, is that on one of our performances on the steps, a hot air balloon came over central Jonesborough, and it was the Smithsonian Institute. And they took pictures of us on the Fringe Festival and put that as a front page in one of their articles.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was really special.
Yeah.
And I just grabbed a little piece of Fringe. Let me see if I can get it in a place where it actually shows. One year we brought a whole bunch of tufts of wool from our sheep and gave them out as the Fringe. And we also turned a pumpkin into the guy who used to play the musical Saw.
Chuck Larkin.
Chuck. We turned one of the pumpkins on the shelf over the steps into Chuck Larkin with pieces of wool for his handlebar mustache and
Perfect.
so on. So that's my little piece.
So thank you, Ed. Thank you, Angela, and thanks for
including us.
For all the people
you kidding me?
Made a special event every year, and it's
Thank
different
you.
every year, but so well loved.
Thank you.
Angela, one last word, and I'm going to bring Regina on.
Okay. I when Sam was talking about emceeing at the festival, so when there were years when Ed was telling or emceeing, or I was telling or I was emceeing, I would bring my clothes and whatever I was going to need for the courthouse steps, and I would stash it in one of the shops close by. I might change my shoes, or if I wasn't using the washboard that day. And I just loved stashing it and getting it. And then always, if we were working at the festival, there was a big bustle to get there, be ready at 5 o'clock, you know. So good. And just lastly was smelling the food in the air from all those food tents that were not so far away. So
lovely.
Thank you. That
Okay,
was so
I'm going to
nice.
put a pin in it there. I'm going to bring my co-producer Regina on. She's going to just tell us about a couple of upcoming shows, and then we'll come back, end the show for YouTube, but then we're going to stay and just have a bit more chit chat afterwards. So Regina, let me hand it over to you. Regina, I can't hear you. Are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Thanks, Claire. Yeah, we've got some shows coming up from 6 Feet Apart Productions. We've got 2 shows coming up. Our first show is our Stellar Slam, February 8th, and that is where all of the folks that won a slam during 2022 will be on stage to go for the top crown of our Grand Slam, Stellar Slam. So that's always a wonderful show. And then after that, we have our Pitch Us a Story, the show. And this is where it's a bit like the Fringe, where people said, hey, can I tell a story? And we're like, well, I don't know. What do you got? And they showed us and we said, sure, we'll do a show. Why not? So this is that show where people have pitched us a story and we're going to bring them on stage, which, by the way, I think if we do this Fringe Festival again, we just need to have some open, like names out of a hat, Ed, where people can get up. You know, you can grab people out of the audience, just like you do at Jonesborough.
Yeah. Good idea.
This has been a wonderful, wonderful show, and thank you so much. I know we want to give a shout out to YouTube, all the folks that were on YouTube. Thank you so much. We also want to give another view of our backstage audience along with our Fringe Festival folks. Big old wave to everyone. Thank you to Ed and Angela for bringing this to us and putting this together. It was wonderful to see everyone. We're going to stick around and have a little after show party, everybody in the backstage. But for the rest, travel safe, be well, and we'll see you next year. Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Lovely.
Goodbye, YouTubers. Thanks for coming. And hang out, backstagers. Thanks for staying out.
6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do. Stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you. 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. These times are quite historical. So step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.